Good evening, cult members, and welcome to Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And this is review number 3 tonight. We watched all the things this weekend. This is going to be our review of The King from Netflix.
Yep.
We've talked about this in the past. We are part of a medieval reenactment group. We have studied the Middle Ages, probably more than the regular Joe Schmo out there. And so we saw that this movie was coming out. But we didn't do a deep dive into what it was going to be about.
Right.
Like I was excited about it because it's Timothée Chalamet, and they've done Netflix has done a really good job about being historically accurate with these movies.
Yep. Yeah.
And
like the Robert the Bruce movie, they did a good job with that.
Right. And so we really didn't know what was it about.
Right.
Too much going into
Middle Ages,
armor,
fighting,
Chalamet, Joel Egerton, and so we were like, oh, okay, cool. Let's we're in. And this story is about Henry V.
Yep.
Going from the prince who would not want to be king,
right?
the playboy prince who was having fun, screwing and drinking his way through his teen years, becoming king. And then working his way up to the Battle of Agincourt itself, and then the marrying of Catherine, and like the end of the movie is I'm not gonna. That's not really spoilers. It's based on history, but the movie ends with them getting ready for the wedding for Henry and Catherine,
right,
and all that,
right. And they're one of my favorite movies is Lion in Winter with Katharine Hepburn as Catherine, them in later years after they've had kids, and she's super
It's the 1100s. We all have daggers. It's the 11th century. We all have daggers. This movie is so well done. There's 3 things I want to talk about. The acting performances first. We have Timothée Chalamet, who is the next great actor. Like he's already been nominated twice. Yeah. He's like 6, right? And he's just amazing. And the entire time, my head kept saying, "He's Paul Atreides. He's Muad'Dib.
Right?
He's Muad'Dib. He's Muad'Dib." But we also get Joel Egerton, who co-wrote this movie.
Yep.
And his character, I actually knew that.
Thomas.
Where is it? Oh, I hate IMDb when they do this. Talk amongst yourself. Ben Middleton's in it for like a hot minute.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Talk amongst yourselves. There he is. Falstaff.
That's right.
And Falstaff is actually a super important person for Henry in his life, and I'm really glad that they had somebody like Joel play this character who is he's a war veteran, and he is just happy living his life the way Henry was living his life, which was drinking and screwing his way through life because he had been through some stuff. But he's also very loyal to his friend.
Yep.
But he's also the voice of reason for Henry very early on in his tenure as king. And Sean Harris is in this as William, who's like the chief head person. Sean Harris is the bad guy from the Mission Impossible movies and stuff like that. But the performances are so well done.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I always find it interesting when they don't go with the stereotype. We actually talked about this in one of our previous reviews, that Henry, and I don't necessarily, I guess he was in history, but he's very smart. Very smart.
Yes.
He didn't want to be king, and so you expect him to fall into the petulant, I don't want to be here, just making bad decisions and listening to the wrong people. And that was not this character at all.
Right.
He was very smart, and he understood what it meant to be king. And Falstaff, when he early on, he is listening to everybody around him because he really wasn't interested in doing this, and he doesn't know who he can trust and who he can't.
Right.
And Falstaff is like, you know, you may be getting some bad information. And
Right.
he was like,
That seems amazing.
And that was all he had to say.
Yeah.
He then figured out all by himself who it was that was feeding him the bad information,
Right.
and started not relying on what everybody else was telling him and thinking for himself. And he made some, you know, obviously good decisions.
Right. He made some great decisions, and then he, as a king, we're going to do a dissertation about Henry V now. But as king throughout his tenure, his wife Catherine was also a very smart
Very
queen,
smart, yep.
and held him to the fire on stuff, and
it was a total arranged.
It
We're going to
made-
get married to bring France and England together.
for the 1600th time or
Right.
whatever, because that's how they worked back then.
And he got lucky
Right.
that she was, you know, smart in her own right.
And they did actually care about each other. I don't know if they actually loved each other in history. Outside of the movie, they really don't get into it too much. But in history, they actually did care about each other and
Respected each other.
and
Because
stuff
they
like
were
that.
both smart.
Yeah. But the performances in this movie are just it's Chalamet plays Henry very subtly at times. You have this vision of what Henry would be in period, and a lot of people see the thought that comes in their head is Henry VIII, who was a
Right.
big giant of a man. And,
Later in life. He wasn't
especially
in the
later in
beginning.
life. But I
Yeah.
mean, even when he was young, he was a big, strong man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Timothy is not. He's very slender and very
Right.
slight, and but he does do the fight scene. You know, he does do the fights, and he does carry the armor very well, and that stuff
Yeah.
is important for me. To have somebody who is playing an important historical character, you need to be able to pull off the costumes and
Right.
be able to walk around in the armor. Now, I know the armor is not really the armor that would have been worn in a period, but I want them to be able to move in the armor and fight in the armor, and they did a really good job with that. The costumes, it'd been really easy to go the full what you think of the Middle Ages, the full pomp and circumstance, which is what a lot of movies do.
Yeah.
With everybody wore big, flowy, bright color,
Right.
big prints.
Right.
All of that doesn't happen until much later in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
The time of Henry, so the late 1100s, early 1200s, even the court garb isn't very flashy per se. I mean, they have one big coronation outfit,
Right.
but they're like everyday.
Coronation's a little different.
Yeah, but like their everyday clothes is
Yeah.
very simple.
This isn't Tudor time. This
Right.
isn't high court. This is a lot of fighting. There's there's constantly
constant war.
wars going on, whether it's the Scots or France, always France. So yeah, they just don't have time for that kind of stuff. They're more worried about armor and swords and catapults and all that stuff.
Great
And-
catapult scene in this movie.
yeah,
Great
Yeah.
catapult movie.
yeah. They're more worried about that kind of stuff than dressing nice that they're never gonna wear anyway.
There's even they have a meeting with Henry and the King of France at one point in time, and it's very subdued. Like everybody's outfits are very subdued. Like Henry's still in his armor.
Yeah.
And now he like cleaned the armor. But it was still him
Yeah.
and his armor was not very ornate. It was very simple.
Yeah.
And a couple of the helmets are like, okay, they're a little stylized of helmets from the period.
Right.
But a lot of the other stuff, the chainmail under the breastplate and stuff like that, they make the
Yeah.
horse's armor was pretty good and stuff like that.
And not to go too geeky on this, but the dyeing techniques, they hadn't perfected that at that point in time anyway.
Yeah.
So they were still using a lot of, if it grew, that was what you were able to dye things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they, didn't get into some of those brighter colors until the Silk Road had really
opened up and
Opened
stuff.
up.
Yeah. The last thing I really want to talk about before we give it a score is the fight scene, the big battle scene of Agincourt at the end. Agincourt is, for those of you who don't know, 20,000 cavalry, French cavalry, charged the English line. The English
French were at the top of the hill. The English were at the bottom of the hill.
The English had, I think it was 6,000 total troops, and 2,000 of them were archers, and longbowmen, if I remember correctly. And it is one of the biggest upsets to ever happen in medieval combat, in combat period, because they fought the battle on a soaked, muddy ground. And so it slowed the horses, and then once the French got dismounted from the horses, now they're super heavy in their armor, and they're not able to move very well.
And they can't even stand, as the King of France proves.
Actually, he's the Dauphin. The Dauphin is played by Robert Pattinson,
right?
With a great French accent.
Yeah, he did really good.
Which was really kind of off-putting for a minute when it started happening. And he's super pompous, and he was awesome.
Yeah, very French.
Very, very French. But the battle itself, the Battle of Agincourt in real history is the basis of a lot of modern storytelling and stuff like that, and whatever. And it was Battle of Bastards they did in Game of Thrones is very much based off of what happened in Agincourt. Outnumbered, big cavalry, tons of archers in the mud. Everybody was kind of smushed together in one little area, and so there was multiple times where I was even I, who have fought in armor in medieval battle, reenactments, even I know they're safe. It's okay, and I'm doing the whole
because they were smushed together. They couldn't even swing a sword. They were just smushed together.
And it was there was a couple times where they, instead of killing them with a dagger or a sword or something like that, they were just shoving people's heads in the mud and
trying to drown them in the mud.
And so
suffocate them.
A lot of people are gonna I think a lot of people are going to look at this battle and go, "Oh, that's Battle of Bastards." Well, Battle of Bastards was kind of based off of this battle, and they did the scene so well by showing both the scope, the size of the area, and the full scale of the lines and stuff like that, but also making it intimate, and stuff. And so I just I was very impressed with what they did with this movie overall. Story, telling this story, telling it in a not in a here's exactly how it went historical accurate way,
right?
But doing it in a way that you can sit there and say, okay, that was correct. All of that's correct. I want to go learn more.
Right. And it's not a love story or it's not a ABC. You go here, this happens, and then you go here and this happens. It's telling the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I wish they would do Hastings.
Well, so you can write to Netflix.
It's all in my head. All I have to do is write it down. I can tell the story 8 Ways to Tuesday.
Yes.
So let's give it a score.
I'm gonna give it. What am I gonna give it?
4.25.
Are you 4.25?
Yeah.
I was going between 3.75 and a 4. I'll give it a 4. I mean, one of our criteria is rewatchability, and I could totally rewatch this again. Actually, as we're sitting here talking about it, I'm like, I could totally watch
it again. Yeah, I was very impressed. If Netflix is going to allow creators to do movies like this, we are going to be able to tell more historical stories without flooding it with dumb romance stories that didn't have to really be there, or to add a different protagonist in there.
Right. The princess was 5 when when William Wallace met her. They
did not have sex, and she didn't have a belly with the knot of his line. The movie's still amazing. None of that movie is right, but this did a really good job, and so we were really impressed with it. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. Like this video, help us out by subscribing to the channel. We're also on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All of those links are in the description down below. You're going to sing this time and throw me off.
Down below. Sorry.
And if we don't see you, until next time, if we don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.